No masters, no slaves, no rulers, no state, no taxes, no cage. To see it is to leave it.
Voluntaryist Academy is an educational platform dedicated to the principles of non-aggression, self-ownership, and the ethical philosophy of voluntarism. Here, we reject the mythology of political authority and embrace the timeless truth that all human interactions should be grounded in consent and moral integrity. Through rigorous study, in-depth courses, and accessible materials, Voluntaryist Academy equips individuals with the tools to critically examine the foundations of coercive systems and to replace them with voluntary, peaceful alternatives rooted in natural law. So whether you are new to these ideas or looking to deepen your understanding, Voluntaryist Academy provides a structured path to intellectual freedom, ethical consistency, and personal sovereignty. Welcome. Explore the curriculum, challenge false assumptions, learn to live free. I'm James Cordiner. Thank you for coming. It's been a few weeks since I've done a live stream, but we're here. We're back. You just heard something I'm very excited to talk about. You just heard my friend, sorry, wrong website. My friend Brendan Daniel. He just created that new song that you heard the chorus of, and he's been a part of this show for a pretty long time now. And the opening riff to this show is something that he recorded in this very studio at Three Path Studio last year, sometime in the late summer. And yeah, it's an honor to be able to feature his music every week. So he's finally got a website at brendandanielmusic.com. So if you like what you heard in the intro, if you like what the riff that you've been hearing for months, and you like the new intro, which is a brand new song of his, and I'm honestly not even sure the name of the song, which if we go over to videos on his website, I'm sure it might be there. Oh, it's not uploaded yet. But if you're really looking for more of Brendan Daniel, you can go over to the freedomundernaturallaw.com website. Freedom Under Natural Law. The Funnel 5 conference was last weekend. It was a blast. I was there day one, pretty early in the day, depending on your time zone, but it was a blast to be there. And thank you again to the great hosts and organizers of that event. I look forward to the future events. Maybe I'll be invited again. Who knows? Maybe not. That's okay too. But if you want to see the replays of that, they have all the replays uploaded over here at freedomundernaturallaw.com/replays of all the Funnel 5 conference speakers, presenters, including myself here. And I'm sure Brendan Daniel, he played music last weekend, and you can catch more of his music over there for what he did for the conference. He is like a good friend, and I can't help myself but to promote his music. He's a singer, songwriter, all around good dude. And so, yeah, go check it out. Tonight, I am airing an interview I did last week with my friend Etienne de Liberty². You can find him at the Art of Liberty Foundation at artofliberty.org. And you can find all of his work from there. Check out the show notes. All the links and everything are in the show notes. And yeah, we can get started in a minute. I just wanted to say, today's my birthday. Today's my 37th birthday. February 28th is the day I was born. And I've been on this planet for 37 years. And so far, the condition of human freedom has not improved too much. but we're still in the fight. We can still make a change. Go check out my presentation that I'm calling Burn the System Down. This is how. It was going to be called Voluntarism and the Fundamentals of Freedom, but I decided at the last minute to change the title of it. Actually, I decided after the conference to change the title of it. So that's what it's titled now. And you can go check that out. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, it is about the things that anybody can do to really start making a change in the world. So yeah, I'm pretty pumped about that. And without any further ado, well, let's just air the interview and we'll see you on the other side for, possible debrief, and we'll see if I have anything to say about current events on the other side of this. As promised, here is Etienne de Boetie², author of the book Government, the Biggest Scam in History Exposed. He's come out with multiple editions of this over the years, and his most recent work is To See the Cage is to Leave It: 25 Techniques the Few Use to Control the Many. And he's a good friend, and for longtime listeners of my work, you'll recognize him from A Hitchhiker's Guide to Truth, but this is the first time he's been interviewed on Voluntaryist Academy. So welcome, Etienne. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you so much.
It is good to be with you and your audience. I think you were the first person that ever did a podcast on my book.
Really?
Is that correct? Didn't you do didn't you do a reading of it?
I did. That was how I cut my teeth with live streaming about maybe 4 years ago. And I did. I went through the 4th edition of Government Scam and in its entirety, and over the course of probably about maybe 7 sessions, a total of maybe 20 hours. So it was a lot of fun, and but I didn't know I was the first one to do that. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I think I'd been interviewed before, but like you're the first person where I didn't know that somebody was going to do something. And I'd found it and it was like super cool. And so and then there was one other time where somebody went through and they did an entire show on me without me being there. And that was like a shock that you're like, oh wow, like somebody that had no idea, like what their thoughts were from the outside. It was really quite fascinating.
Yeah, that
It's
is
weird to
interesting.
be a little tiny minor public figure.
Yeah, that is interesting. Huh. Well, let's go through. Let's talk about your new book here. To See the Cage is to Leave It. First of all, interesting title. I like it. I like it a lot. And could you just, let us know how you came up with that title, and what inspired you to put this book together?
Well, first of all, I taxed it from Stefan Molyneux, and so I think he was the first person to use it. He used it in a documentary, talking much about the same thing that I'm doing. That the real cage that governments have over the people is a cage of the mind. That it's legitimate, like they've kind of tricked the population into thinking that government is legitimate, desirable, and necessary before people are really old enough to really evaluate the logic and the morality of that claim. And for your audience that isn't, familiar with my work, my first book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History, makes the case that government has been the biggest scam in history. And when I say that, what I mean is that it's impossible to have a moral, legitimate government. And so you can't delegate rights you don't have yourself to a representative to represent you doing something you don't have the ability to do yourself. You can't be bound by a social contract you didn't sign. Democracy is the moral equivalent of gang rape or a lynching. And so really the government that we have now has been running a variety of unethically manipulative techniques. The first book breaks down 20. It's kind of like the playbook, and it shows what those techniques look like in the United States and in the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany and East Germany. And then this book breaks down 25 techniques around the religion of having a government. And so, really, that's the big reveal in the book. To see the cage is to leave it. 25 techniques the few use to control the many, is that government is being slipped to the population as a religion. Now, they don't call it a religion, but they're using a variety of unethically manipulative techniques to trick the population into having a religious attachment to the government. And it's the subtitle of my first book is how government, the biggest scam in history, is how intergenerational organized crime runs the government, the media, and academia. And in this book, a lot of the techniques are being run by the media. And so their media trickery, they're weaving the flag into moments of high positive emotion. They're product placing the flag sometimes dozens and dozens and dozens of times in movies and in kind of the right scenes and moments to give you a warm and fuzzy about the government. They're putting kids into mandatory government schools or accredited private schools where they control the content of the curriculum through the accreditation process and through textbook amalgamation and through tradition and things like that. But all of these techniques are creating a religious attachment, and it's I don't want to like give away the end, but it's a cult. And you can see people that are supporters of the government and that have bought into it and don't realize that these techniques are being used on them, exhibiting classic cult behavior. The MAGA movement is an example of that. The fact that people are wearing the flag of the system that is stealing over half their income in overt taxes, covert taxes, and inflation. That's part of it. Part of it is there's a little bit of Stockholm syndrome involved. And if your audience doesn't know what Stockholm syndrome is, it's the tendency of people that are essentially captured and have no choice in a matter like kidnapping victims. They will develop an affinity for the captor as a kind of survival strategy. And so I think a lot of people that don't want to be going along with what the government's doing, they're scared of the government, and they've developed this version of Stockholm syndrome where they're willing to overlook all of the lies, all of the the horrible things that the government's doing, from goons on the street to waging wars based on obvious lies and manufactured intelligence and murdering people globally and just ridiculous theft and corruption at the very, very top. And so that's really the kind of the thesis of the book is I'm exposing these unethically manipulative tricks that the government uses to get people not just to go along with it, but to be religiously attached to having a government and to be, in their hearts, religiously attached to being an American instead of a free, a free independent human being. And so that's kind of the good news message of the book is, you don't have to be a Crip if you live in, in East LA. You don't have to be a Blood if you live in Compton. So the United States is kind of the artificial tribe that the government is forcing people into, and everybody's an American because, James, it's been decided for you.
Now, how many generations do you think it's taken to create this religious attachment to the state?
So, I mean, so in the first book, I make the case that the control of the information that the population receives about the legitimacy, the necessity, and the desirability of having a government goes back to the quote unquote founding of the country. And so there was a battle between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Anti-Federalists are saying, no, we don't want to have a federal government. It's a bad idea. It's going to centralize power in the capital, and it's going to, it's going to be tyranny, and it's going to be horrible. And then the Federalists were saying, no, we're going to bind down the government with the chains of the Constitution, and we're going to guarantee all of these rights and the Bill of Rights. And it turns out the Anti-Federalists were right. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the Federalists were censoring the Anti-Federalists. And I break down some quotes in Government, the Biggest Scam in History, going back in Van Doren's book, The Great Rehearsal. They talked about that the Federalists had bought off the stenographers during the Pennsylvania ratification debates, so that they only transcribed the speeches of the Federalists and not the speeches of the Anti-Federalists. You can go and search, for postal mail tampering. They were censoring the mail. They were going into the mail. They were removing Anti-Federalist messages and pamphlets and things from the mail. And then in the Anti-Federalist paper, everybody reads the Federalist papers, but nobody knows there's an entire another book. I got a copy of it here somewhere.
Yeah, I've begun to sorry to interrupt, but I've begun to cover some of it on my channel. I've done number one,
yeah,
Anti-Federalist paper number 1 so far. But the goal is to, not in order, but to go through and kind of as time goes on, just kind of pick and choose which ones I'm in the mood to kind of create a video for, to put it more out into the zeitgeist, or out, and to make it more readily available for people, because you're right, it is censored even all the way back then. And not to say that a government wouldn't have been formed, but at least, maybe there would have been a better chance to see if a different government perhaps would have been formed, because I think that these guys back then weren't against government. They weren't anarchists per se. I don't see any evidence for that, but they were definitely driven to preserve liberty in the best way that they could have. And I see it as like as kind of like the start of something beautiful. Like, if we can start a culture around liberty, then in maybe 100 years, the government is so small and insignificant that like the minarchist dream would have come true.
Yeah.
I maybe it's wishful thinking, or maybe I'm smoking a little too much hopium, but it is something that I think of quite often. Do you ever, not to change the subject, but does that thought ever cross your mind as well?
You mean how it would end? How we win in the end, or how liberty succeeds after it's failed for decade after decade after decade in the United States?
I mean, more so like the development of the U.S. government over time, and the censorship of the Anti-Federalist papers. If not for that censorship, what do you think? Do you ever think about the way maybe things would have developed differently over the course of time?
So I think we would be, well, I think without government, we would be fabulously, fabulously wealthy. And I think that most people just don't understand, economics, and understand how much wealth and prosperity that we would have, if not for them just stealing the value out of the money. If we just had, forget the overt taxes, which is, the income tax, forget the covert or hidden taxes of every time you get a gallon of gasoline, every time you get a, bottle of beer, every time you, get a cigar, every time you buy an airline ticket, every time you pay your cable telephone bill, every time you pay your, cell phone bill, every time, like on and on and on and on, all these hidden taxes. If they just weren't stealing the value out of the money, I think we would all be crazy, fabulously wealthy. I think there would be much more economic activity if businesses had confidence in being able to, invest, and individuals had, and be able to get their, their money back. If there wasn't, all the malinvestment because of, the tax laws, if there wasn't like if there'd be so much more economic activity without government, we'd all be crazy wealthier. There'd be more generational wealth, so more people wouldn't have to work because the government is stealing, like I'm sure everybody knows, has got friends that, whose parents are wealthy and would pass along that wealth if it wasn't being stolen in the capital gains taxes and things like that. And so I think there'd be more people that would be wealthier, which is a good thing. We want to have as much wealth in society as humanly possible. They wouldn't have to work. They could devote themselves to the arts. And then that means people would have to pay more money to the people that were working. So they would make more money. And then the dollar would buy more because people aren't stealing the value. And so it's kind of like it's a virtuous cycle that would drive, much more wealth for the average person. The average person would be way, way better off. You'd pay for your own education, so you wouldn't have these crappy government schools. So the kids would actually learn, marketable skills. There wouldn't be this kind of like school to prison pipeline where the kids learn no skills, and then the government has the right to arrest them for things that aren't really crimes and gets them into the system. And it would just be so much better. It would be fabulously, fabulously better if we just didn't have government. Now, I know some people, well, you're maybe in your audience, it's common, more, common knowledge that, government's been a scam and things like that. But a lot of people, because, on television, on every single channel, and this is the weaponization of the media, this is the most powerful weapon in the government's arsenal, is this control of perception. Most people, when they see a future without government, it's a Mad Max dystopia. There's biker gangs raping women, and it's just it's anarchy, the purge. And so people are like, they can't even imagine what society would be like. Number one, because they've never thought about it, because they've never had to think about it. Nobody's ever questioned them. They've never been exposed to an economist or to a futurist that could explain to them, how you could have everything that you want the government to do without the government. And so that's the magic of spontaneous order. That's the world is this kind of self-organizing system. And because, people want roads and people want armed protective services, and, that the government calls the police, and people want dispute resolution that the government calls the courts, we'd be able to work all of that out without a corrupt middleman, top-down hierarchical control. And I think you'd get a much better, you'd get a much better outcome, without the monopoly police. There would be different, security companies that would be competing for your dollar. They're going to be more efficient. They're going to do a better job. You're going to have, choice in, who protects the neighborhood. You can see, does Brinks do a better job, or does ADT do a better job, or does Detroit threat management do a better job? And so they're going to be competing against each other, and they're not going to be able to arrest people for victimless crimes. They're only going to have the rights that you have. And then that system makes sense, and that system's fair, and that system's just, and that system's going to give you a way better outlook than a monopoly provider that has a monopoly on violence. And if you don't like it, I've had, you protest, the criminality of something that the police are doing, and the first thing they're going to do is they're going to try and arrest you. They're going to see if they can, find some charges, or they're going to make up charges, or they're going to get into court and test-a-lie against you. And they've even got names for it, test-a-lying and the blue wall of silence. And so it's not a good system that we're under right now. And I think it would be just dramatically better across the board.
Now, what would I mean, there might be some people out there going, but Etienne, without government, who would provide checks to the system and make sure that people are held accountable?
So there really are no, that's the funny thing is, so, like government, the idea of government is great, right? Looks good on paper, okay? In real life and in practice, doesn't work, doesn't deliver the goods. at all. The Constitution has not limited government at all. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights have not even protected the basic natural law rights outlined in the Bill of Rights. And in fact, the Bill of Rights was thrown away by the government 5 minutes after the founding. And so, once these, if you're reading the Anti-Federalist Papers, and my lovely fiance went and brought me a copy of the Anti-Federalist paper, my favorite is Sentinel. And Sentinel is like, these are conspirators, these are criminals, this is a conspiracy. They collapsed a newspaper. That's the other part that we talked about them censoring the mail, and but they actually withdrew all of the subscriptions to a newspaper in Pennsylvania that wasn't necessarily pro anti-federalist. They were just covering it legitimately. And the Federalists didn't like that, and so I think it was when you say, when he says that they withdrew all of the subscriptions, that's them working together, and really the only organized power back then was the Masonic Lodge system. So there was somewhere around a dozen Masons at the hijacking of the Pennsylvania convention. There was over almost a dozen more suspected. There were 2 that became Masons right after the convention was over. And so I think that was the organized force that was being used to hijack a convention that was only convened to amend the Articles of Confederation. And then after a lot of people wouldn't participate, they didn't show up, they left early, these conspirators, they produced an unauthorized replacement and then jammed it down the country's throat, using this control over that, information that is now exists today, and is now, the algorithmic censorship of the internet, it's the monopolization of the media. And that ability for the government and really the owners, because the government is a puppet of a faction that I believe is the bankers. I think it's the banks that are really at the top of the pyramid, and government gives the bankers the ability to create money out of thin air. Back then, the scam of the day during the ratification debates was that the states had issued, and the federal government, the nascent federal government had issued, the Revolutionary War government had issued bonds, and with no ability to repay them, and they issued millions and millions of dollars worth of essentially worthless bonds that had sat, unpaid for around a decade by the time that that this hijacking of the Pennsylvania convention happened. And so they went and they started buying up these bonds, and then the kind of the scam was, we're going to get a government in and we're going to give it the ability to tax, and then we can buy these bonds for pennies on the dollar, because nobody expected to actually be paid. And so what a lot of people don't realize is they were quietly buying up the bonds, but once they realized that they were going to get this government in, they sent riders across the plains, they sent schooners up and down the coast, and they had agents that were, trying to buy up as many bonds as humanly possible. And then, they get the government in, they begin taxing, and then Alexander Hamilton pays off the bondholders at 100% face value of the bond on the dollar, even if it was, bought by speculators. A lot of times, speculators won't be paid the same as if, like the guy that actually got the bond. And so, but he paid the speculators 100, cents on the dollar. And then he went and he paid off the states that had racked up crazy debts. And one of the other things I have in the book, and I've got links to, to Jefferson's own notes, is Jefferson didn't believe the amounts that Hamilton was proposing. Now then, to pay for it, because I started to explain this and we got a little sidetracked, But when I say that the Constitution was thrown out the door 5 minutes after, it was signed, one of the first taxes that the new government passed was the whiskey tax, which was interesting because a lot of people, I don't know if a lot of people know, but George Washington was one of the largest distillers in the country at the time. And to this day, the distillery still exists at Mount Vernon. You can go, take a look at his distillery. It's still producing booze to this day, kind of a thing. And so Washington institutes a tax that essentially benefits big distillers at the expense of smaller distillers, which is the same way that the corporations do today. They jerry-rig the tax code to where other smaller people can't comply, and they don't have the regulatory ability to meet all the regulations, and so the smaller competitors go out of business. They're not as profitable because they have to have these layers of bureaucracy. But anyway, so Pennsylvania said, screw you, we're not paying it. And there was what became popularly known as the Whiskey Rebellion. And so Washington and Hamilton march an army of 13,000 people into Pennsylvania to put it down, and they begin searching houses without warrants. They begin rustling people out into the snow in the middle of the night, searching their homes. They begin making people sign loyalty oaths to the new government. And so a lot of people don't realize they threw the Constitution out the door 5 seconds. Once they had an army, and once they had the ability to tax, and once it was legitimate for them to use force on the thing because they were elected, it went out the door. And by the way, the election, less than 1%. So there's 3 million people on the continent. Less than 1% vote in the election. But that's enough for the bankers to raise an army. And then, I think they just began, having their newspapers proclaim it valid. We have a new government. There's a new government. And I think at first, to your point, I think a lot of people didn't worry about it, ignored it, laughed at it, whatever. They didn't have the ability to project force until the Whiskey Rebellion. And then they did it, in very, kind of, surgical ways. So it didn't really affect most people. And so most people ignored it, and they just kept, entrenching themselves, buying more and more newspapers, getting the idea out there to where people quit questioning the legitimacy of it. And then after a couple of generations of going to, and then once they took over the school system, that was it. That was, that was really game over, because now the kids are being raised in the orthodoxy of the state and the orthodoxy of the religion, and they begin, using some of these unethically manipulative techniques on the kids that I break down in the book, not just to, imbue them with statism, the belief, the indoctrinated belief in having a government and the legitimacy of the government and the necessity of the government and the desirability of having a government, but also, the government schools are waging a number of unethically manipulative techniques for obedience to the government. So there's a hidden curriculum in the government school system that produces obedience in the population. And so, you can't raise your hand to go to the bathroom. You can't go to the bathroom without raising your hand. You can't, leave the school at all without the government's permission. In some cases, your parents can't come and get you without the government. They won't release you to the parents. There's been, cases where that's happened. In a lockdown situation, they're not going to let the parents get to the kids. It's crazy. You can be searched at any time. So the school is conditioning you to being searched by a government employee, and they can go through your locker, they can go through your backpack. You can be searched at any time. So they're conditioning the population into going along with this program. They're indoctrinating the kids into the the DARE program, so that they're socializing the police officer and the legitimacy of the government's jackbooted thugs and immoral policemen that are using violence on peaceful people for things that aren't really crimes, which is how they're immoral and it's unjust. But that's being indoctrinated at the school through the DARE program, through the school resource officer. Um, they're using techniques like the red, yellow, green troublemaker board, where they're publicly shaming kids that talk out of turn, or like if you raise up in the government school system, you get hammered down, and then you get hammered down again, and then you get a hammered down, and pretty soon you're not going to object to anything. You're there's no obedience. And the teachers, they don't understand this. They just know that they've been taught these classroom management techniques. And the classroom management technique says, well, everybody uses, because it came out of Columbia University, that everybody uses the red, yellow, green troublemaker boards, and everybody uses public shaming, the quiet table in the cafeteria. Everybody one of the reasons I wrote the first book is on my kids, they were using collective punishment in the cafeteria. And I went to have lunch with my kids one day in the cafeteria, and they have a little table tent on the table, and it's got a green, it flips over green, yellow, red. And if one kid talks out of turn at the table, they come by and they flip it to yellow. And if somebody else talks at that table, they flip it to red, and they punish everybody at the table. And so, like, that's collective punishment, and that's wrong. It's morally, incorrect to punish some other person for something that somebody else did. And so now you create a social pressure that hammers that kid down, using his peers. It was illegal to use collective punishment in the prison of war camps during World War I and World War II. You can't punish everybody in the barracks if one, guy tries to escape. And so it's illegal for them to use it in warfare, but the government schools can use it. I could go on and on. I think you get the idea. But there's a whole hidden curriculum in the school system that I break down in the new book, To See the Cages, to Leave It, that a lot of parents do not understand is going on in the school system.
Yeah, I've kind of taken what you've called intergenerational organized crime, and I've kind of built off that, and everything that you're describing about the public school system and like the obedience to the state, to the government. I think I've coined this term, I'm not sure, but I've been calling it intergenerational cultural conditioning.
Oh, I like it. Yeah, it's true.
Where it's a culture around obedience.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it's happened over the course of many generations. Otherwise, like what you mentioned a while back in the conversation, that's why they take the kids when they're 4, 5, 6 years old and start then, because if you took a 20-year-old and tried to convince them of these things, they'd probably tell you to go pound sand, because
Yep.
and they wouldn't fall for it. They've already got a mind of their own.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to get them while they're young. And it is so that's what I've been calling it. And I'm glad you like it, because your organized crime there it helped me kind of build off that, and your work has helped me kind of realize that in a way, in many ways. So thank you for that. And that sucks. I didn't experience much of that in school. I'll be honest, but I didn't make it very far. Before I got out of there, and I realized it was not the place I wanted to be. And
Out of curiosity, did they have JROTC in your school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did they have Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts affiliated with the school?
I can't remember. But then again, I did change schools a lot. We moved around a lot. So my attention was on, like, I was playing Magic the Gathering and skateboarding and listening to, rock and roll and everything with whoever I could make friends with. So, but I did notice that there, like, as I got into high school, some of the what is it, JROTC,
JROTC,
that program and everything, and which is honestly just such abhorrent behavior to put in the mind of a young person, that they should want to be in the military so they can go and kill and murder on behalf of the bankers. Because I mean, what you're touching upon with the banks is something that is, I think, not given enough attention. I think that it's starting to get there, but really it could use a lot more attention, because people, I don't think, understand the significance of the influence the banks have had on not only our government but governments all over the planet.
Mhm.
And I'm not apologizing for the government here and trying to pass the buck onto some other institution or whatever, but I mean, when we have in our own history figures like Andrew Jackson getting, an assassination attempt because he kicks the central bank out, he kicks out Second National,
Mhm.
and some the guy's name, I forget the guy's name, but he was deemed, after the attempt, was deemed insane, but when he was in the asylum, claimed that he was hired by very powerful men in Europe.
Mhm.
um the Rothschilds come to mind. I mean, it's so I like what you're saying about the banks and everything like that.
So, I mean, let's talk about that, and let's just give the audience
Yeah.
some more, more context around that. So I gave you the example of the kind of the financial industry, Wall Street scam of the founding, buying up the bonds and paying off the debts of the states that that had run up debts, including of questionable amounts, so that the amounts might have changed and grown larger by the time they were paid. So that's, I think, what Jefferson, the point he was making when he questioned the validity of the debt and the amounts of the debts. And so I think, like, oh, we're gonna, like, now we've got a government, now we have the ability to tax, and now we're gonna steal these people's money and we're gonna give it to somebody that's going to give it to us in the Massachusetts. So like Virginia had paid off their Revolutionary War debt, Massachusetts had not. So we're going to give it to some criminal in Massachusetts, and he's going to give it to somebody, some friend of his, and say that that it was owed. We talked about that, but the even bigger scam that traps society today is that the banks have the ability to create money out of thin air using a technique called fractional reserve banking. And so, before 1933, when you had a $20 gold piece or you had a $20 bill, that $20 bill was essentially a warehouse receipt for a $20 gold piece. You could go to the bank, the bill was so you didn't have to haul around really heavy gold, and you could go to the bank and you could slap that $20 gold piece on the in front of the teller, and the teller would, or the bill, and the teller would give you a $20 gold piece. Now, why that's important is you can't manufacture gold on a printing press. You can't create digital gold the way that the banks create digital dollars. And so the money that people earned and saved held its value, and in a time of hard money, prices were actually deflationary. They were going down. So your dollar bought more and more and more and more every year, where now the dollars lose more and more and more, purchasing power every year. So it was very advantageous to have what's called hard money, to have money that can't be printed on a printing press. And to my point about the Constitution has absolute, like, sound, looks good on paper, doesn't really work, doesn't bind down the government with the chains of Constitution, is an abject failure. The Constitution says there will only be gold and silver, will only be money, because they'd known that paper money didn't work going back to the time of Voltaire. There had already been, dozens, if not hundreds, of experiments with paper money, that the quote unquote founders on both the anti-federalist and the federalist side, like, that was, nobody wanted paper money. Everybody knew what happened if you had paper money. Bad things happen when you have paper money. And so there was it was written into the Constitution. And so, the way the kind of the scam, we had, previous to 1913, we'd had two, banks of the United States, and both of them had been corrupt. There was the First Bank of the United States. It had a 20-year charter. At the end of that charter, it's corrupt. It gets kicked out. Second Bank of the United States, you already mentioned it. Andrew Jackson said, "You are a den of vipers. I will rout you out." And he kicks out the bank. There was an assassination attempt made on his life. I think there were two assassination attempts made on his life, actually. And so but they were able to kick it out at the end of the 20-year charter. And so the bankers wait, they wait, they're long-term thinkers. They wait another generation or two before they try it again, because people, understood, what was going on back then. And so you got to wait a generation or so before you make the full court press again. And so in 1913, the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, really details the chicanery of the bankers getting together with the politicians. They go down, they take a private train down to the Jekyll Island Club off the coast of Georgia. They have a secret meeting. Nobody's allowed to use their last names. You weren't allowed to bring your servants. You weren't allowed to, it was unbelievable, secrecy and security. By the way, the private train was like the private jet of today's time. And so, they're in this private train. They go down there and they draft what will end up being the Federal Reserve System. And so the Federal Reserve, this national bank, is going to stand behind and guarantee the regional banks and allow them to ultimately engage in something called fractional reserve banking. But once the Federal Reserve began to issue the national national currency, what I and others believe is that they began cheating the same way that the original goldsmiths cheated. And back before, the frontier banks and other things. And so the idea of these warehouse receipts were not new. And so at one time, thousands and thousands of banks issued their own warehouse receipts for money, and most of them were honest, but a bunch of them weren't. And so, you'd go into the bank and you'd give them your physical gold. They would give you the warehouse receipt. This is a 1 ounce gold, coin is on deposit with us. And then if it was a crooked bank, what they would do is they realized, hey, not everybody comes for the gold at the same time. So we can just stroke out some extra warehouse receipts and we can go spend them into existence, and now we're stealing the value out of the company. This is the original inflation. And so they began buying things and living high on the hog in the town or in the city until people get wind that the bank is cheating. Then there's a run on the bank. Anybody that has seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life at Christmas knows what a run on the bank is. People, the banks, giving out more money. They're giving out more receipts. They're a crooked bank. We've got to go get our money out. And so there's a run on the bank. Everybody lines up to get the gold out. And then the people in the front get paid and they actually get their gold. And then by the time the guys at the last of the line, oh, whoops, sorry, we don't have any more gold, because they were lying and cheating and stealing. And so what the Fed did is that allowed the bankers to do it on a much bigger scale. And then the Fed would step in and save, other banks. But by 1933, I think that gotten out of control. Also, FDR, there was they had a budget deficit. They had, bonds that were due that were going to be problematic for the government to pay, because how Washington, D.C. works with political promises and spending other people's money. And so in 1933, so they passed the Federal Reserve in 1913. Within 20 years, it had gotten to the point where the only way to, for the banks and the government to pay their debts was to steal everybody's gold coins and bullion. And so in 1933, FDR passed an executive order forcing Americans to turn in all of their gold coin and gold bullion. That's all the bullion that's in Federal Reserve. That's why the government has as much gold as it does, because they stole it from the American people. And then the dollars that they replaced it with lost value immediately. I mean, it just began, going down, and we began losing, purchasing power. The government, but we still had silver coins, and so there was still a kind of a check on, on what's how much the government could steal and how much they could print up and things like that. So in 1965 they stole everybody's silver coins. So the government and the banks working together, the banks, when people would bring it in, they would send the real silver to the government, and they would replace it with the coins that we use today, which aren't even really coins. So a lot of people don't realize this, but a coin is a disc of of a precious metal that's or copper that is worth its weight in the metal of the coin. And so technically what we have, because there's like right now, the only coin that's actually worth its weight in its own metal is the nickel. The nickel is worth 6 cents. The nickel is 25% nickel, 75% copper. It is the only U.S. coin that is actually worth its face value in metal. And it's actually worth 6 cents. It's not worth 5 cents. It's actually worth 6 cents in metal. But every single other coin, a quarter might have 6 cents worth of value in it. A dime might have 4 cents of value in it. And so they're not even technically coins. They're technically tokens, the same token you would get in an arcade. It's a representation of money. Doesn't actually meet the definition of money. And so the government stole everybody's coins and replaced them with these base metal tokens, and then it went off the rails. Now there was still somewhat of a gold standard that the government was held to, because the government had issued bonds in gold to other countries, and what they were doing to their citizens they weren't doing to other countries. And so so that all went off the rails in 1971. And so in 1971 Nixon ends the convertibility of gold. And so so what was going on is the other countries that had bought US bonds and that were supposedly backed in gold and redeemable in gold started realizing the United States was cheating and was printing up too many bonds. And so the French government sent a warship. Some people say it was a battleship, some people say it was anti-submarine training vessel, whatever, but the French government sends a warship to New York City, and they back it up and they say fill it up, and they start removing and taking physical possession of the gold. And then as soon as that started happening, and the American government realized the jig was up, Nixon declares bankruptcy, and then that's when it all falls off the rails. And I actually have an article right here that I wrote called "What the F Happened in 1971." You can get it at my Substack for free at artofliberty.substack.com. And what it is it's just graph after graph of hyperinflation, of like I'll just give you just some examples. I'm gonna find the one with the housing. Like banking crises go through the roof. The federal debt goes through the roof starting in 1971. The national debt goes through the roof. Where's the one on how much it takes? It used to take like 2.5 years to save enough for a down payment for a house, the average person. Now it takes like 7-8 years. Housing prices go through the roof. It's like the American population got dramatically less wealthy once the government was able to steal the value out of their money and just print a gazillion dollars. And it's not the government. I mean, it is the government, but the government is best thought of as a creature of this intergenerational organized crime system centered around banking, centered around central banking. And the way they make their money is right now they're able to create dollars. So the Federal Reserve, go back to the Federal Reserve. So now, starting in 1933, when they steal everybody's gold, now the banks no longer have to, the dollar is no longer a warehouse receipt for, a $20 bill isn't a warehouse receipt for a 1 ounce gold coin anymore. And so now the banks have the ability to issue dollars. And so when you go to the bank to get a mortgage, or you go to the bank to get a car loan, or you go to get a personal loan, or you use your credit card or whatever it is, they're not loaning you depositor money. They just tickle the ivories. They credit your account with these digital dollars, even though it's inflationary, even though it's stealing the value out of everybody else's money. And so the more dollars they create, think of a dollar like a Babe Ruth, rookie baseball card. If there's only one, rookie baseball card, it's worth a whole bunch of money, right? If there's two of them, it's worth a little less. If somebody finds an unopened case of Babe Ruth rookie cards in a warehouse somewhere, the price collapses completely, because dollars need to be fairly scarce to be able to hold their value. And so as either the banks or the government themselves create more and more digital dollars, and it's both of them together, it's it's crazy what they're doing, then that's stealing the value out of everybody else's dollars, the same way as if they stuck their hand in your pocket and stole your money. They're just stealing the value out in this tricky way that most people don't understand, that the school isn't going to tell you and the monopoly media isn't going to tell you, because the first thing that they bought, was the media, so the media wouldn't tell you about it. And that's really where we are today. And the only way you're going to find out what's really going on in this country are these pirate broadcasts like James's. And this is how you find truth, because the purpose of the existing monopoly media isn't to inform you, but it's to deceive and distract you. And it's, children's games played by adults, and it's just ridiculousness, because they want you paying attention to everything else. They don't want you paying attention to how you're being robbed. I think Caitlin Johnson said it best, where she had an analogy. She says it's like the American people are watching, an elephant puppet and a donkey puppet fight in a puppet show. And as the people are watching the puppet show, thieves are going around stealing and picking their pockets and taking the money out of their pocket. And the people are told that they can make the theft stop by cheering harder for their favorite puppet.
I think that's something called forced perception, where it's they're showing you what they want you to see, so you're going to be focused in on that. It's like thinking that only what exists in your view from looking from the inside of a building out of a window, and thinking only what exists in your view out that window is the outside world. You can't see the sides, you know what I mean, or the top and the bottom. Just it's tunnel vision.
Well, I think that in propaganda, the technique's known as framing. And so
Okay.
in propaganda, the framing is the ability for the propagandist that controls the camera to point the camera at exactly what he wants to be in the frame. And so you don't, there's a very famous, cartoon of a guy. It looks like he's
Yeah.
he's stabbing the guy.
Yeah.
And it's really, the guy's running from him, and he's not stabbing him at all. And, but the way that he has it framed, it looks like it's a murder. And then you pull back and it's not a murder. And that is the advantage that the propagandist has. Is
Seeing your frame.
Yeah, that's my lovely fiance said that's the meaning of you've been framed. Like if you frame somebody, you're
Oh, no
framing.
kidding. Really?
Yeah, yeah, and so that's the advantage of the propagandist, is the propagandist is controlling the camera and what you see on the television set, tell-a-vision. And a lot of people don't know, but the root word of the word entertainment, there's three Latin words. Enter means to enter, tain means to hold or possess, and mente is the mind. Entertainmente. And so the ability for Hollywood to enter your mind and hold it and possess it, so that they can show you this BS view of the world, that's the power of, the control perception. That's the most powerful weapon in the world. That's why people have like that's we covered in the new book, To See the Cages, to Leave It. A lot of the reason that people have the warm and fuzzy that they have is because the government is tricking them by showing them specific things that will give them the warm and fuzzy. They're doing tricks like anchoring at stadium sports events where they do the
Right.
flag worship ceremonies, and they have the jet flyovers, and that's a marketing technique called anchoring, where everybody, you're at the you're at the Super Bowl or a bowl game or like whatever, and everybody's in a good time, and you got a couple beers in you, and you're eating fun stadium food, and you're got the energy of the crowd and everything. So they're going to show you the flag, and they're going to do the flyover, and there's going to be high energy, everybody's like, whoa. And so they're anchoring the government to the excitement of the game, and to the excitement of the crowd, and the energy of the crowd, and the everything like that. And so they're doing that over and over again. They're anchoring things on the television. Rocky's win for the United States, or in the movie The Martian, they're like the entire movie builds up to this climax where, is Matt Damon going to get off of Mars, and oh, something went wrong and he's not going to make it. No, he is going to make it. And boom, they're going to show you the flag, and everybody's waving American flags, and they're going to cut to mission control, and there's giant American flags. So they've taken you on this thing. They've built up the entire movie to this moment of high positive emotion, and then they show you the flag. And most people don't realize that this is going on. And so the feedback that I get from the book, To See the Cages, to Leave It, is it's very, like my other book, it's very picture rich. And so what we've been saying is, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so when you just flip through the book, and you've seen it, what I'm talking about, and maybe you could like tell me, like you almost don't even have to read the book. You can just flip through it and go, oh wow, they're running game on me, aren't they?
Well, what you've done is brilliant, because the visual representation does so much more to really to really make you think about what's going on, rather than just words on the page, which is great. Like, to be able to go through, people process information in all sorts of ways, but the visual representation that you've provided in both of your books is such an amazing tool. Because, I mean, not that I wouldn't say that you're using I wouldn't necessarily say that you're doing mind control over anybody, but what you've done is counteracted what they're doing with some of the similar techniques, only with more positive and moral messaging. And by that, I mean by giving people the truth instead of lies and propaganda. You've done that in your books.
Well, here's the difference is I'm not trying to I'm using my knowledge of how human beings learn to
Yeah.
accelerate what I call the moment of insight. And I'm using visualizations to make things that were invisible now visible to people that didn't understand that was going on.
Yeah.
And so, like whether it's the monopolization of the media, you can try and explain to your friends and relatives that on the old media side, television, movies, radio stations, newspapers, satellite networks, cable networks, you can try and explain to them that six companies own it all and they're running hundreds and hundreds of subsidiaries, but they may or may not believe you. But if they actually see a media ownership chart and understand that News Corp doesn't just own Fox News, but they own 175 newspapers, and they own radio stations, and they own television, local broadcasting, and they own film studios, and they own Sky News, and they own satellite networks in Europe, and like all of a sudden they're like, holy shit. And it's because they saw it with their own eyes, and because that being able to see a media ownership chart is going to bring them, more information than you just telling them about it. It's going to be a richer, understanding of the topic than they would have had, otherwise. And so that's really the magic. What I'm doing is I'm just using how people learn to shortcut them, with the goal of being able to have a book that you can give to your friend or to your relative or to your colleague, And even if they're not a reader, all they've got to do is like really kind of flip through this book, and they're going to have a level. If they don't read a single, word on the page, just flipping through it, they're going to have a level of understanding that is going to be way, way better than what they had before. But what we found is once you give it to people, they're hooked, man. They're going to read the whole thing. And then they're out. And so this is the other, the really the benefit of my work is that, you can only trick people. The magician can only fool people until the audience understands how the magician does the trick. And then once you understand how the magician does that trick, then the trick loses all of its power. And so once people realize that the government is running these unethically manipulative tricks on them, nobody likes to get tricked, nobody likes to get fooled, nobody likes to get chumped. So a lot of people, they're out. They're not going to, they're not going to be going along with the government anymore. They're going to tell their friends, they're going to be ticked. They're, they're going to take down their flag. And we have reports of people taking down their flags and giving up the ideology. They're going to pull their kids out of the government school system. And so that's the good news message of my work is I actually think I'm very optimistic. I think we win in the end because I don't think that there's any way in the information age for this secret to stay. The secret is that the government's illegitimate on its face and the government's running these tricks. And I think that that's slowly and surely spreading through society. And more people are realizing it, and that's only going in one direction, and it's kind of exponential. I'll give you a fun fact. Both of my books, both Government, the Biggest Scam in History, and the new book, To See the Cages, to Leave It, both of those have become the rare titles that people are buying in bulk for their friends and their family and their colleagues. And so over 10% of the books that we sell, we call it a friends bundle, and we sell them in 5 copies and 10 copies, and they're going out the door, and people are putting them in libraries, and they're putting them in little mini libraries in neighborhoods. We just had a woman last month, a retired secretary in North Carolina, bought 258 copies of To See the Cages, to Leave It, and she's distributing them in her community in North Carolina. And she started with the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department, she dropped off a case of 41 copies to the sheriff's department. They got confiscated by one of the command officers in the sheriff's department. I began calling, she began calling. It got around to the rank and file members of the department that this book was being censored. And my understanding now is they've forced the distribution. Now all of the people within the rank and file employees and the deputies, they're all going to find out that the government's been tricking them. And so the schemes that they're doing and and it covers the immorality of what the police are doing and victimless crimes. And it's going to hit hard. And that's the kind of thing that's going on. And so you can't stop that. You can't censor that. There's no there's no way to censor a physical book, handing a physical book to somebody. And so we make them available at, low cost donors to our Liberty Foundation, essentially price support, people to be able to buy these low cost version, these 5 and 10 packs and 258 copies at a time. And so I just don't think there's any way to stop the signal in the information age. I think we win in the end.
What we've done here tonight is barely scratched the surface of what's been going on behind the scenes and what's been building that cage that they're trying to hide from people. And it's true. Once you see the cage is to leave it. It's mind control, really at its core, a whole bunch of propaganda to get people under control. And it starts up in the mind. And what your work is doing is it's uncovering that for people in a very brilliant way. I appreciate your effort. Thank you for your service. I want you to please tell people about your website where they can find your work. I know you mentioned your Substack. I'm going to provide all sorts of links down in the description for people to click away. But please give your plugs and we'll say goodnight.
Sure. So my organization is the Art of Liberty Foundation. We are a startup public policy organization. We're kind of a think tank. The goal is to have something like a Heritage or a Cato, but from a principled voluntarist standpoint, that the government is illegitimate on its face, and that it whether or not you believe in having a government or not, you may not be a voluntarist and you may believe that we ought to have a strict constitutional government if we just got the right people in there. But even if you believe that, I think the one thing that we can agree on is that the government in Washington, D.C. is being run as a criminal enterprise. And so that's what we're trying to expose at the Art of Liberty Foundation. That's artofliberty.org. You can get Government, the Biggest Scam in History, exposed at government-scam.com. You can get To See the Cages to Leave It at seethecage.com. Our Substack is being heavily censored. And so if you want to support us at artofliberty.org/sponsor, and we'll give you a subscription to the Substack for free. Substack shouldn't be giving a nickel. They're now openly censoring the truth movement and voluntarist voices and things like that. But it's artofliberty.substack.com, and you can get the article for free that I mentioned, What the F Happened in 1971. You will be shocked. It's mostly just graphs of just how the country changed after there was absolutely no tether to gold. The U.S. dollar was not tethered to gold anymore, and it's absolutely shocking to see how many different denominators of national wealth or well-being or what Americans eat. Like steak dropped like a rock, and Americans' consumption of chicken went through the roof. It's just absolutely fascinating. That's artofliberty.substack.com. And then we had some really important announcement this week where we launched a website and Substack and Instagram and Telegram in Spanish. And so the book, To See the Cages to Leave It, has been translated into both Latin American Spanish and Castilian Spanish, and will soon be translated into German. It's already been translated. We're going to be releasing translations in German and French and Greek coming right behind it. I'm working on a guy that hopefully will do Hebrew and Israel. And I did a talk show there a couple weeks ago, and all of these governments are running the exact same techniques that I outline in Government, the Biggest Scam in History, on their own populations, and that's what we talked about. So that's why that it's pertinent to all of these other countries. Thank you for the work that you do, and we're all in this together, and this is why we're going to win, because there's 1,000 flowers blooming. And so thank you for your work, and it has been a pleasure to be with you again and with your audience.
Pleasure's all mine. And I can't wait to see what the future brings for your work, Etienne. All right, everybody, go over and check out his work and support his Art of Liberty Foundation, because the information that you'll get there is truly eye-opening. And yeah, so we'll have to have him back on. We'll have to have you back on real soon and continue with this conversation. I mean, we just barely covered
we only, I swear I was just thinking that we only covered like 4 or 5 techniques. There's 25 techniques in the book. We covered maybe 5. Maybe we touched on 5.
So we'll have to get you back on real soon to continue this, because it's a really I am just 100% just like enthralled in this conversation. I mean, oh man. I've read your books. So, anyways, I gotta go, or else we're gonna end up talking for another hour. All right, thank you very much, Etienne, and we'll catch you very soon. All right, I'm back live. That was a really, really fun interview. Thanks again, Etienne de la Boetie². Check out his links in the description below, and go see about his new book, To See the Cages to Leave It. Check out his other book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History, Exposed. It's truly a fun read and pretty there's a lot of information. It's densely packed, and he does a very, very very good job at laying it all out in a very comprehensive and clear manner that you can leave the book on the table and it's a conversation starter. um, I don't know if I really have enough time to really get into current events in the way that I would like to. So I guess what I'm just going to say is that the playbook is they're running the same plays as they always have. Okay. The people of this country, of the United States, seem to be unifying under the banner of a common cause. The Epstein files have been released. However much stock you want to place in the government releasing Epstein files, I mean, it'll never be good enough for some of us, right? But it's pretty apparent that they're lying about a whole lot. And I don't usually speak about things like this because I like to make statements based on evidence. So based on the evidence that we have, it seems as though that there's been a lot of people over the years who made claims and they were correct. The government has been covering for a child sex trafficking ring run by Jeffrey Epstein. These people are raping and eating children. That's the worst offense in the files that people are admitting via email, that they are performing those extremely disgusting and immoral actions. Now there's been a war, supposedly a conflict. We'll call it a conflict. It's a war that has been started on behalf of Israel, on behalf of a welfare ethno-state in the Middle East called Israel, who has been bleeding our country dry. The tax base has been paying the government under duress, and that money has been going to various countries all over the planet and has been going toward paying back the debt that we owe the Federal Reserve. And it is a very, very eye-opening time when you consider that they are starting this conflict and ramping it up due to the fact that the exposure of what the Epstein files has exposed. These people are raping and eating children. Let that sink in. And now they're going to go start a war. And thanks to all of the loyal order followers out there who are amoral, disgusting people who by now should know that they can't trust the government and they shouldn't work for them, but yet they still do because of the intergenerational cultural conditioning that I keep mentioning, and I'm going to keep hammering it home. Let me pull up what I mean by this. Okay. Let's see if I can get... is it just gonna... Hold on a second here. So I found a... Oh, man. Hold on. What the hell? Well, hold on a second. Shit. All right, let me pull it up here and I'll put it on the screen. It's a good example of what I mean when I say this. Here we go. Just put it right here, nice and large. This is what they're doing to people. This is how their system carries on and preserves itself. This is what I mean by, this intergenerational cultural conditioning. This is a major part of what I'm talking about. This is a very good example of what I'm talking about here, and it's very true. This is the technique that they're using. Okay, and it goes more than just being a tax slave. It goes into being an order follower as well. Everything that they put in front of you in your sports ball, and on the news, even in the public school program, in the institutions that are run by the government, everywhere you go, you find out that it's all programming to make sure that the government goes into the future to exist in order to enslave you and to make you a tax slave, or worse. There's worse things than being a tax slave and being an order following scumbag that's going to go to the Middle East yet again to fight a war yet again under the guise of bringing freedom, when there's people out there that have been admitting for decades the natural resources that are in the ground in Iran are what they want. Okay. The greater Israel project that's been a part of the modern narrative for quite some time now. It's very true. The expansive nature of Israel in the Middle East to create like a Anglo-American Israeli hub. They have to have the Israeli part in there. And so we'll get rid of this picture off the screen now, but we'll go back to May here. And so, yeah, consider that this is all a distraction. It's all a way to cover up yet some more of the findings in the Epstein files. I'm really hesitant to put, I mean, I'm not surprised that the files would say the things that they do. I'm just hesitant to really put 100% of faith in the legitimacy of what those files are saying, because it's the government that's releasing them. And I have a very strong opinion on whether or not I should be trusting the government at all, ever. However, it's one of these very rare crossroads you find yourself at with this kind of thinking, where you're just not surprised. And maybe, just maybe, one or two people with actual principles who actually think that, maybe there's a way to, and it's never moral. It's never moral, but maybe there's a way to run like Thomas Massey, for instance. Maybe he's a man of principle. Now, they're very shaky if he thinks that the government should exist, but yet he's the one in there trying to get the files released. And every time there's an incident where people start unifying over a cause, something like this occurs. Something like this always comes about. So that's what I think is going on. That's what I think is happening. It's to divide people again. It's to create a smokescreen and to create a war. What they are doing, and this is what makes me so angry, is they're fucking with my kids' future. That's why these people are my enemy. And I will not rest until I see to it that I've done everything within my power to make a difference in this fight for freedom. Because that's what I believe. That it's a moral duty. It's a moral obligation to speak out against this. And I have to I have to act in some sort of self-preservation because my children need me, so I can't go doing anything crazy. But you can count on me to continue doing these live streams, to continue building up this channel, and to continue having excellent guests and excellent material to help further bring the cause down the road, in hopes that someday there'll be an increased amount of freedom due to an increased amount of moral understanding, moral action. If you have any order followers in your life, you should at least bring to their attention that this is not a war to bring freedom to anyone, and that they should abstain from doing that job because of what it's really about. Whitney Webb wrote a book called One Nation Under Blackmail a few years ago, and it's not good. And I think that the people that are basically advocating for us to go to war in the Middle East again, I mean, how did it turn out last time? Not very good. But I think the people that are advocating for us to go to war are the ones that are blackmailing all these politicians. You notice how Trump goes and, without the approval of Congress, Congress is supposed to be the ones to declare war. He goes and does military actions and everything like that. And he's like, we're going to war. And I don't remember hearing anything about Congress declaring that they went to war, that they want to declare war. So anyways, all of this is just done to increase the amount of slavery on the planet. That's really all it's all there to do. And people with order followers in their surroundings should remind them of that, or at least bring that to their attention, however painful and emotional it might be. I understand that some people might find this topic pretty boring, but it's been on my mind all day. It's you don't like when you have children, you don't like seeing these types of things unfold. You don't like seeing these things happen because it means that the future is going to be, it could be anything. We were in the Middle East for 20 years. Oh, Rip Me is in the chat. He says, whatever. Yeah, it can't be whatever, man. I don't know what you mean by whatever, what you're saying whatever to, but it can't be whatever. We have to understand that what these people are doing in this war in Iran, and what they're trying to do is distract from the fact that evidence has come out that they are eating children, that they had a child sex trafficking ring operation, that they've all been blackmailed, that the level of corruption, although it's not news to a lot of people, but now there's a lot of evidence, even though it's the government that is releasing said evidence, there's a lot of it. And what a time to go to war when, it's been ramping up over the last couple of years, sure, but so has the push to release the Epstein files. And these scumbags will stop at nothing to preserve their way of life, to preserve their control, and to do what it takes, do whatever it takes to remain in the ruling class, and to make sure that a ruling class exists in the future. They will stop at nothing. So that means we have to stop at nothing. We have to stop at nothing to get attention on this cause, and to make sure that we, first of all, understand the amount of power that these people have. And it's not about being a coward and not going to some extreme length to put a stop to it, because it's never going to stop if you're one man viewed as an extremist that's going to go and do something fucking stupid and commit an act of perceived violence where the narrative can be twisted around to make you look like a bad guy and actually hurt the cause for freedom, we don't get much done on the inside of a jail cell. What we get done, where the real work is in the open air concentration camp that is the country in which we live in, where we still have a limited amount of freedom, but we have enough where we can at least do something like what I'm doing on this channel, which is speak out against it and try to raise attention to it, because natural law dictates that the majority of people, we need a critical mass to make a difference. And if we really want to put a stop to this, we have to speak out, we have to speak up, and we have to spread the word of natural law and morality and how immoral what they're doing is, and we need to stop it. And that's the truth. That's the truth. So, yeah. At this point in time, it's not whatever. We got to do something about it. And this is the most we can do. And to be effective. To be a teacher, I'm still a student, I'm still a teacher, both at the same time. So, today is my 37th birthday. Wahoo. They started World War III on my 37th birthday. What a time to be alive. I want to encourage everybody to go over to voluntaryistacademy.com. I got to work on uploading. I mean, Jason Bassler was on almost a year ago. I got to work on uploading more videos to the website, but you can find all of them on YouTube. And thanks to the hard work of one lovely volunteer, I've had a great expansion of my Rumble channel. So if you don't like the YouTube and you want to go over to Rumble, you can do that too. Rip me. I know you're not giving up, dude. I'm not giving up either. And people like you showing up to the live stream every week and giving me a little encouragement keeps me going. And I think that the only way we're moving forward and making sure that things happen and things get done is when we do things like this, you know, civil disobedience type things, and you know, free speech exists because we have a voice box and we have a way to manipulate the sounds to make language, and we have ways to make sure that people can understand what we are saying. Free speech does not exist because the government said so on a piece of paper. Don't let anyone out there listening to this, don't let anyone ever tell you that government gives you your rights. Don't let anyone ever tell you that your rights come from government, or that you don't have rights because you're a child, or that it's a privilege. No, these are natural law rights because it's in our nature as human beings to communicate. They don't have it's not right to tell us what speech is allowed and what speech is not allowed. That's up to you as an individual to decide whether or not you want to speak the words that you think. And it's when people comply with stupid fucking free speech, hate speech laws and all that shit. When people comply with that stuff is when they win. Now, don't go out there and start, you know, running up on people and doing stupid things and that you don't, you know, but you get the point. You get the point of what I'm trying to say. You can go to voluntaryistacademy.com and sign up for the newsletter. I haven't sent one out in a long time, but it's helpful to sign up to the newsletter because as this channel gets, you know, as I start making more and more videos, and as this channel starts, you know, maybe getting more eyes on it, then what we're going to have, we might have a problem with censorship. So it's probably in everyone's best interest to sign up to the newsletter in case the YouTube channel doesn't exist anymore one day, and you can stay in touch by signing up over here. Or you can become a sponsor for like $3 a month. You can help support the operations that go on here. This website needs to, it costs money to run this stuff. You know, if you like the content that I'm producing or the interviews that I'm doing or whatever, I have a family, I work, I make ends meet, and I get by. But the majority of this operation has been supported by sponsors and donors. So if you want to be one of those people, you can come over here and become a sponsor and get access to a Discord server. And I'm trying to get a bi-weekly meetup going where we can all hang out for a couple hours every couple weeks, or maybe every week, and just have private conversations and talk about solutions. You know, we can talk about solutions over there. Okay. You can go over to the resources page here where a bunch of PDFs are available, many of which I've covered on the channel, some of which are yet to be covered. And, you know, you can download these for yourself for your own archive. I got to add more as time goes on. If you don't want to be a monthly sponsor, you can just make a one-time donation to the efforts over here at Voluntaryist Academy. You can go over to the One Great Work Network. If you want to make a one-time donation, you can go over to voluntaristacademy.com/donate. Go over to the One Great Work Network at onegreatworknetwork.com and check out, I think almost 80. I think there's 80 content creators over here. And they're all hitting home runs, talking about natural law, the occult, you know, liberty-minded folk. And you can find somebody who you jive with in the field of study that you're interested in when it comes to all of this freedom stuff. You can go to getautonomy.info, check out Richard Grove's 12-week course where you can learn how to help people solve problems. I don't know why this website's not loaded, but I'll have to check that out on the back end of my website. But you can go to getautonomy.info and check out his offer, see if it's right for you. If you end up signing up, tell him James Cordiner sent you. And because I am an affiliate with Richard Grove's autonomy course, and that's just one more way that you help out my efforts here. Write me a short message over here at the contact page, voluntaristacademy.com/contact. Write me a short message. It goes into my email box. I might not see it for a minute, but if you want to reach out and write me a short message, please do. If you want to talk to me more often than in a YouTube chat or a short message on my email, become a sponsor and join the Discord channel. If you sign up for the newsletter, you get a free PDF. Automatically sent to your inbox after you sign up. You get a PDF of the Voluntarist Creed by Auburn Herbert. Auburn Herbert is the man who coined the term voluntarist. And if you really want to learn more about what it means to be a voluntarist, or what that phrase or what that term means, Auburn Herbert's the man to teach you. And I've covered his work on this channel before. But a voluntarist, let's put it in simple terms, shall we? Just to cap off the evening here before I go. A voluntarist is not one who voluntarily walks into a slave system. It's not somebody who voluntarily walks into this condition of slavery. This condition of slavery does not exist on voluntary basis. It exists through engineered consent. In order for it to be voluntary, one would have to have informed consent. It seems like I'm splitting hairs, but I'm not. These terms matter. Informed consent, you don't get to be a slave when you have informed consent. These things are contradictory in nature. Okay? So through engineered consent is how they've built this condition of slavery. And we'll be getting into more of this as time goes on, because next week I'm going to be continuing with The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke, with another slideshow conversion of that book. And then after that's done, I want to get into Jeremy Hahn, my buddy. Jeffrey. How good of a friend am I if I don't even know his first name? But Jeffrey Hahn wrote a book called The Fallacious Belief in Government, and I want to cover that. And then probably try to wrap up the Socratic Logic series after that. But when we get into the fallacious belief in government, we'll be talking about engineered consent and how they trick people into thinking that government is there to protect you, and that you should support government, and that you should apologize for them. So voluntarism is not about volunteering, really, for anything. It's not volunteerism, it's voluntarism. We believe that through voluntary interactions, peace happens. Okay? And in order for it to be truly voluntary, you can't go around coercing people or having people in a state of duress, or tricking people and being deceitful or deceptive, in tricking people into doing things for you. Okay, that doesn't build real freedom. It builds slavery. It's immoral. So it's not as simple as just considering the term voluntary and whether or not something has been done voluntarily, because for it to be truly voluntary, you need to be doing it with informed consent. To know that with your conscious awareness of the world around you, mixed in with your conscience, your sense of right and wrong, that you agree with what's going on. And this is kind of a litmus test type of thing. But why would you, if you're doing something wrong, then you're violating somebody else's natural law rights. So it's not voluntary for them. So it can't be voluntary for you. I hope everybody that watches this goes back to, I'm going to go back to this for just a second. And I hope people go into freedomundernaturallaw.com/replays, and they get a chance to go back over the funnel conference that I was a part of last week. There I am right here. And you can check out my, yeah, it is. My name is James Cordiner. And you can check out my presentation. But you should check it out on my channel, on this channel. It's called Burn the System Down, This Is How. But if you want to check out other people's, why are these guys' thumbnails bigger? My ego is so hurt. I would suggest you guys check out Tyler Bloyer's. Tyler Bloyer did an amazing presentation about technology, and Brendan Daniel, who provides the music for this show, he was there as well, and he did a great job performing music and doing an interview, and you get to really get into his music and see his artistic expression and how it manifests, and his relationship with music and tapping into the muse. And I want to also promote Brandon Martin, who's been on the channel. His presentation on thelema is something that I think more people should get their eyes and ears on and form a better understanding of thelema, not to practice it themselves, but just to understand it for the esoteric, occult the esoteric and occult teachings that a study like Thelema can provide for you, a better understanding of some deep occult knowledge, thanks to Brandon Martin in his presentation. So that's all I really wanted to promote for the funnel conference right now. I still have some presentations that I haven't seen that I want to catch up on from day 2. But yeah, last weekend was a blast. One last thank you to the organizers of that conference, Will, Leslie, Chris, and Derek. Great job, guys. And I hope you guys have fun with the next one. So that's going to be it. That's going to be it for me here. Don't give up, everybody. Don't give up. I know that this is like, you know, it's a test. It's a test to your will. It's a test to your own constitution and to see what you're going to tolerate. And my suggestion to you, everyone out there, is to start speaking up against it and to let them know you don't want to tolerate this shit. And I don't know. We should just call it there. Anyways, I'm going to play the chorus for Brendan Daniels' new song that he dedicates to the book that Howard was talking about in his interview. And this is the new intro to the show. But before I do that, I just want to let you guys all know that I love you and I want peace and tranquility and harmony under natural law. That's what this channel is dedicated to. That's what I'm trying to hopefully teach through the readings and the interviews that I conduct in order to kind of help the future be more free. You own yourself, period. No one else owns you. And we just have to start acting like it. Peace out, everybody. See you next week.
No masters, no slaves, no rulers.